Mastermind call with the Dream Makers Network. So glad to be on this call this morning. I can't, it's, every now and again, you kind of are preparing for the week and things that are going on. I will tell you, I'm happy to be on this call this morning uh, for 1,001 reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into on today's call. But if you're on the call for the first time, we welcome you to our Mastermind call with the Dream Makers Network. Byron Deese, and founder of the Dream Makers Network, and just truly thankful to have this opportunity to share and connect and just kind of grip and grind with you guys and talk through all the things that we are working on, things that are in our thoughts and ideas, things that we'd like to bring to life. Just really thankful that we have this network where we can really come together on areas of personal development that you may not feel comfortable having certain conversations with anybody. But when there's a network, a group that you can go to and just dive into the ideas and what's possible as it relates to going from where you are to where you want to be. And just as simple as that. That's really, I would say, the idea of personal development is to recognize where you are, but know that there's still much in your thoughts and your ideas and your spirit to get to another place. And it sounds easy when you just say it like that, yeah, okay, I'm here, but I want to go there. And for some people, whatever there is, whatever that next place is, it is much further in practical steps to get there than others. Some folks will say, yeah, I'm not a good cook, but I want to become a good cook. And we say, okay, great. Well, what are the steps to do that? I'm married, but I want a better marriage. Okay, what are the steps to do that? I have children, but I don't have a really good relationship with them. Okay, what's the steps to do that? I'm poor, but I want to be rich. Okay, what's the steps to do that? And that's where we are. That is the core and the crux of this conversation that we have once a month, just to talk about, to get from where we are to where we want to be, the ideas and the possibilities of personal development. And what does personal development mean to you? And what will that level of growth and development do for you from a mind, body, and spirit perspective? But also, if you were to advance personally, just in your own life, what would that do to other people? Who would be affected by your development, by your growth? And it's so many ways to think about that, because the honest part is when you do grow, that means you are moving from where you are to some other plane, to somewhere else. So there could be people who don't want you to go anywhere. And I don't mean maybe moving, physically, but who don't want you to change what you're doing, because it could be the case that where you are currently is an asset to somebody else, to their objectives, to their peace of mind. And these are the things that we have to grapple with. Is that I'm here for a reason. I'm in a space where I am for a reason. There are others who are affected by my current state of being. And so if I make a decision to go from where I am to where I want to be, in that other place, I'm surrounding myself with possibly new people or involved in different things that somebody may feel left out. And I can tell you, and I bring that up early on this call, because whenever I'm having conversations with folks and even just dancing around growth and development in my own mind, before I can even get too excited about it and get all fired up about it, that those people or those things that are currently in my life start popping up in my mind. So, oh wait, whoa, 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 whoa. How would this affect Johnny in this? Like if I do this, you know, will she be affected by it? Will he be affected by it? Will it, feel a certain way or whatever the case may be? That's a reality. But I think it's important for us and everybody who's on this call and part of this network over the years to come to grips with the fact that personal development is just that. It's personal development. And we all have to go through that in our lives. I got to a point where I used to wrestle with that a lot about, is this the right thing to do? Is this, are my goals, are there certain goals that I have in my mind and my spirit I shouldn't pursue because other people might be affected by it? Over the years, I've been affected by that and said, I think I'll just hold back on that. I talk about here recently, I've talked about it a lot. I said I should have started my business 10 years ago. At this point, 11 years ago. I was like, there was a prime opportunity. Things were great. The market was great. The access and everything was probably the best time for me to do it in business and even in my social circles. But I was like, how old was my daughter at the time? I mean, maybe she's 10, so maybe 4 or 5 years old, something like that. And there was still, we just moved to a new house and bigger mortgage and just a lot of, and then was doing well at my job at the time, was one of the top sales guys at that time. So it was just reasons pulling me to say no, don't do it. Maybe in the future, but not now. And I think back on that, and it comes from the standpoint of we all have those decision points where we say, why should I do it now? Should I do it later? And embracing the spirit of personal development and knowing that your development is personal first. And it's hard for a lot of people to put themselves first. It's just, now some people, they don't care. They'll put themselves first all the time. And they may have challenging relationships, if you will. But for those of us who dance around with that in our head and our spirit, I think about moving back to Florida. And we've been here now, it'll be 4 years this year. We'll be here in Florida back. So time is flying fast now. But, I hadn't been here in 23 years, so while away for 23 years, those ideas would also pop in my head. Like, man, not able to spend as much time with my family and people who I grew up with and things like that. So you wrestle with these things that will make you say, wait, don't try to grow too fast. Or don't try to move away from your norms too quickly, because it's going to affect other people. But I will say this, and this is what I have digested my spirit, and I have some years of practical experience in this. Anytime I have personally said I'm going after a particular goal that I truly believe is in the best interest of my spirit, of what I believe God has called me here to do. And that's the way that has always been my way, my personal, the way I've dealt with this is, if I believe in my spirit that God called me to do this work, then whoever's in my life will benefit too. That's the way I have. Let's go one step further. I've also digested my spirit that If there was somebody in my life who did not benefit from it, then they probably shouldn't have been there. There are people in your life who aren't supposed to be in your life. And it doesn't mean that you don't love them and you don't feel a certain way about them and all of that. But in this conversation of personal development, and for me personally, because of my faith, it's hard for me to talk about personal development without talking about the creator as well. That it's not so personal. It's really that conversation between you and your creator as to what am I doing in this life and why? And is it pleasing in the eyesight of God? That's my way of approaching it. Oh, excuse me. And I will tell you, that is the way that, if I don't do it that way, then now I'm into my logic and my thoughts and I probably wouldn't pursue much of the goals that I have in this life. Pursue many of the things that I believe would add value to, my spirit, that make me feel better about the day to day. I probably wouldn't do it, and just do marginal, okay, I think everybody else is going to benefit from this too. Cool, let's go now, that kind of thing. But I just really want for this call, and whenever we come together for this call, and even when we have our one-on-one times, that you just feel free enough to specifically think and talk about your personal goals and objectives, regardless of who else will benefit or be hurt by whatever you're pursuing. If we can get to just that spot to say, this is what I want to do and why, and let all the other stuff, who's going to be affected by it, come later. But it's not a part of your early thoughts in pursuing the goals that you have in this life and things, those inspirations that get you going. And so I just wanted to kind of set, as we earlier in this call, just set the mindset around personal development, and why it's so important. Why it's so important for you. And just leave it there, right? Because I'm quick to always talk about, hey, it's going to be great for you, and it's going to be great for a lot of other people too, But where else can you go and just talk about yourself and just talk about what's in it for you, full stop? And how is this going to help you go from where you are to where you want to be? And so if we can get our thoughts and our mind in that space and in that spirit, then I believe that we're really open at that point to all the possibilities that are available to us to become available and ready to go. So thank you guys for joining us this morning. And for those of you who are connecting with us online, we appreciate you. We look forward to seeing your comments in the section here on LinkedIn. And we got somebody walking around. I can't hear you. But we really appreciate you. And we look forward to having you dial in and share your goals and objectives on the call today. And let's make sure we push mute, because I don't have access to that console right now. So let's push mute if we're moving around. So I got to tell you, on our last call, we did talk about the work equation. And, I want to say this, and I can say this on this call. Over the past several years, I would say maybe 10 years ago or more, maybe, I heard like a motivational speaker. He talked about these different equations that he used to get him excited, to get him motivated, get his purpose and his thoughts lined up. And there's always these different, this plus that times this and that, and it's all these different things that would get him going. And I always wanted to come up with something that was it for me, and just try. And I will tell you, over the years, I've really like I was like, well, hard work plus prayer times love equals the best life or whatever, just really testing all these things out to see what would really settle in my spirit, and that's something I could use and go back to as often as possible, especially when I'm attempting something new. When I'm attempting something new that I want to accomplish, a true goal. And on the last call, we talked about the work equation, and that settled in my spirit because I wanted to go into this new year with the work in mind. Like, what is the work to get to where I'm trying to go? We talked about where you are and where you're trying to go, but what's the work? What's required? I talk about with a lot of my clients when we're talking about staffing and getting the right people on your team who will help the business grow exponentially, and that will allow that business to become attractive to investors, that you have people who understand the operations and who understand the objectives of that business, how to scale it, how to take it to the next level. And if you bring in someone on your job on the day one, what is the job description? What are they doing on day one to help that business scale and become successful beyond your thoughts and wildest dreams? And so that has been at the top of my thoughts in terms of how do I get from where I am to where I want to go. And so that's the other part. And so when we talk about the work equation, it could, I don't, when I look at other, folks who are in the personal development space, and a lot of times it is focused on, freedom, the freedom mindset, or, this goals 2026 or whatever, like big things like that. But I couldn't get past the fact that, when 2027 comes and 2028 comes and 2030 and all these future years, we're still going to try to ask the question, what is the work that I have to do? Like, what do I need to do right now to get going? And even when you're not in we should always be in a goal-oriented mindset, I would assume, I would think, even if I'm 100 years old, my goals may be for my kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids, but that's still a goal, right? But there should always be that practical aspect of, okay, what am I supposed to do right now? And so that's why the work equation for me settled in my spirit to say, this is what I have to do. And I'll tell you something, man. When we look at that equation, goals plus risk times faith equals the work. And after our call last month, I really wanted to challenge myself to really take my goals to a new level. It's easy for, we can come up with goals that can provide some marginal success, things that we in our thoughts that we probably can do without much effort. If we just said, you know what, I think if I just do a little bit of this, I can get there, And so that is the cool thing about goals, because there are little successes that can keep your mindset, fired up and excited enough to stay in the game. So that is a cool piece of it. But I would say, for the purposes of this call, and for those who've taken time to kind of dive into a personal development network, I really want us to stretch our capacity and thoughts. What does a big goal look like for you? And not to say that it's so big that it's impossible, because we don't want that to become, because if you set a goal that's too big and then you start working toward it and you realize, on step 3 and step 4 that this is too big, I can't do this. That's not a realistic goal. So there's a difference between a big goal and a realistic goal. So you want to set realistic goals that are big, so something that could really change the game for you, in all the ways of the development that you're trying to take on. And so and I'll tell you, and I shared this with Maria and Maddie, that they're in working with other entrepreneurs, and you're spending time around high achieving people. But when you are spending a lot of time with high achieving people, and then you hear about their concerns, their fears, you see that they built their business and their organizations and their ministries in ways that were uniquely to them. And so when you try to say, okay, well, that was great, you built this, it's great, awesome, now let's build a business. Say, whoa, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that? I got a business. Like, look around, you're here at my business. It's like, no, you've built something that you know how to do. You've built something that you have doubled down on the skills and talents and ideas that you have, and you've created something that is valuable to the marketplace. And it's great that you know how to do it, but can you build a business that other people understand how to do it too? Something that will continue to thrive when you're not there. Can you build a business? And that is the core and crux of the conversations that I'm having every day with entrepreneurs. Can you build a business? I know you've built a great, proven to the world that you can create wealth, that you can take care of your family without having to work for somebody else. You're strong in that S quadrant. And I want to bring back to folks who either never heard of or for the first time or haven't read this book in a long time. One of my favorite books is the Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, which was the follow-up piece to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The Cash Flow Quadrant does give you that proper explanation of how you take in money and how you earn income and what quadrant you're in and why. And, just as a brief recapture on that, if you're an employee, W-2, you're in the employee quadrant, and that's how you earn income. You exchange your time for money. For those of you who say, no, I'm tired of this, I'm not good with working for other people, I'm going to start my own business. You start your own business, you make the money that you were making as an employee. Some people make 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 times that money that they were earning as an employee. Now the self-employed person, and they have a good lifestyle, but they run a lifestyle business. That business moves as long as you move. Once you stop moving, the business stops moving. So that is that strong S quadrant business that is a lifestyle company. And then you move into the B quadrant, which is the business quadrant. Essentially, you have now taken what you know and understand as your business, the thing that lifestyle business that you run, and you've trained and educated other people to do it too. Now you have created a system that others can actually get in and do. You have staff and good people on your team, and they took that baton and they're running it. And you're just there to kind of tweak it. Make sure this is working, that's working. Maybe you're lending yourself to certain aspects of the business that will help it to continue to grow and thrive. But you have built a system. You've built something that can last without you. That is the B quadrant. And that I quadrant is when you have essentially sold that business, become independently wealthy, and now you are an investor. And so you now essentially have the money and the resources to invest. in other businesses and like organizations to what you built and sold. So, given that quadrant, how do you earn income? Some people earn income in multiple quadrants, especially once you become an investor. There are a lot of folks. I have a client now who's a doctor, and she, when you start talking to her about the type of uh, and she works in the you know ICU cases. When the bad of the bad, the worst of the worst. When she shows up with her team, this is life or death. So someone who's been in that type of space in ICU for more than 3 days. So specialty work, and she loves it. I mean, I'm glad. If I'm in the ICU, I want people who love doing this kind of work to be there too, right? And she loves that work. And she's like, well, I don't see myself ever really fully, not being engaged, because this is what I like to do. This is what I do. So yeah, there are times. I mean, you could have sold your businesses. You could sold multiple businesses. You could have millions of dollars, ready to go. But there still may be time. You say, I want to spend, 2 or 3 days a week in the ER. I want to do that. That gives me joy. That gives me fulfillment. I'll even contract myself with somebody to do it. If you don't run your own businesses anymore. So there's still a quality of life after you've even reached that pinnacle from a financial perspective, that you can still say, yeah, but I want to spend the rest of my days doing something that I enjoy and that is fulfilling. So goals still live as long as you live. But just thinking through those transitions and where you are and where you want to be and what is it going to take. And and so for me, I went into this year saying that, yeah, I want to, my thoughts are heavy in the transition from the S quadrant to the B quadrant, and to build a system to really get to a place where the business is more philosophy than anything else. It's almost like a mindset. A lot of times when we meet folks who manage large investments, they have their own strategy. They have their own buy-sell strategy and trading strategy, and why. And it becomes very, I would say, philosophical when you meet folks. A lot of times you meet investment managers who manage, billions of dollars. So what you study in college? It's like, oh, philosophy. I was like, philosophy? What? Like, shouldn't you be a doctor or a professor or something like that? And no, and they took that thought process and mindset and applied it to a methodology that has that is produces a nice rate of return for folks. And so, I agree with that. I think that we all have our own way of seeing things. We do have a method that you believe in, that it is your cornerstone, that makes you feel really good about what you're doing and why. And the challenge is that just sometimes people just don't know that you move on a certain philosophy. You have this methodology that you use. And if more people knew that, they would also say, hey, you know what? I like what you're doing. Like, can I give you some money? Or can I spend some time with you to learn more? What's your fee? I'm in. I like that. I need to adopt that, And that's what when we talk about bringing value to the marketplace. It's really just bringing the things that are valuable to you, sharing it with others, and folks are saying, yeah, I get it, count me in. I need that, right? I got this going on, I got that going on, and I like the way you talked about this and designed that. I think this could work for me. And so, that's when we think about goals and positioning where you are to where you're trying to go. taking a really deep dive into what has worked for you and why. What are those? Because we're at that point. It's not like we're like fresh out of college, and I'm assuming most of the folks who are on and listening to us, are you know seasoned people, if you will, so and have some years of experience at different things, enough to say this is what has worked for me. If you sit down with an aspiring person to do what you're doing, and they say, "Tell us about how'd you get to this point," and you can share with them, "This is what has worked for me." I think that's a great thing for all of us to do, even if no one asking. I'm asking you, like, what is that thing that helped you to get to where you are? And if you can just identify maybe two or three things that has worked for you, jot those things down, and then kind of embellish on those pieces also. So, well, this is what got me here and why. I actually started this organization because of something that happened in my childhood, or when I was in college, I had a professor and they inspired me to do something a certain way. So I went after it and I started this, so that everybody has a story. And there's some type of story that was kind of the cornerstone of what was going on with you and how you ended up there, and the whole nine. And we have to get to a point where we can just kind of own that. Like even the story, and the story itself is an asset. Especially again, if you have a powerful story that's kind of pushed you through job to job, organization to organization, how you raising your kids, like whatever your story is, that is an asset. And I want to make sure that we know that. And so many times we have folks who are very, humble, and they don't want to bring a lot of attention to themselves and things like that. But I want to just make sure I say for this call that your story is power. It is unique to the person who's never heard it. And you never know who you could inspire by telling your story. You can say to yourself, that's just what happened. It was just had to do that, and this was that, and whatever. Meanwhile, you're telling this to somebody and their eyes are wide open because they are trying to approach what you've already been through. They're looking at this with wide open eyes and ears and a ready spirit to follow what you've done. And the thing is, I'll tell you something else. Depending on who you're talking to, sometimes the person that you're talking to could be older than you, but you've spent time doing a certain thing for so long, and they're just starting in that space. And they're like, I got a pen and a pad, and I just want to talk. I just want to take me down the road of what you did, how you did it. And they could very well it could be your parent who's saying, you know what, I've done all that. I raised y'all. I finished that career. I'm ready to do something else. So I say all that to say, to just remember that your story is an asset. And if you tell your story and you get excited about your story, and not just kind of kick it as, oh, these are just the things that I went through, trust me, you will find an asset that others will pay for because they are trying to get to where you've been. And they may just want to associate with you. They just may want to be in your network. And that's valuable. They'll say, hey, listen, I will, what's the fee? What's the fee just to hang? And that's what all this stuff is. It's like, I need to be in a new space that gives me access to all of the possibilities that weren't on my radar before. And it seems like you have the ticket. Like every time I see what you have going on, and you were here, you were there, I want in. I want in. So again, when we're talking about just your own unique story, own it, jot it down, be very clear and honest with yourself about what were some of those things that you did to get you to where you are, and recognize that what you've just jotted down, and if you really own that story, that it now can become an asset. And when I say an asset, I'm meaning an asset that is valuable to the marketplace, where people will pay you to, one, hear that story as often as possible, or to help guide them through what they're working on. So this is something that I think is important, especially, there are different points where something like that is really valuable. One, I have a lot of clients who sell their companies, and then now they're still kind of young, and they're like, what do I do now? Like, what do I do? I'm like, well, you know what you should do now? You should tell other people, other business owners, this is how I did it. You may have been running that business for 20 years or 30 years, you inherited it from your dad and all this, and you've never had a vacation, or you've never had a liquidity event. If you paid your bills running this business, but you've never had access to be able to unlock the value of that business, because you never had any investors come in and buy shares in the business to give you a big lump sum, or there's so many business owners who've never, I'm talking about businesses that are doing tens of millions of dollars. They haven't had a liquidity event. Some of them billions of dollars. They're just, private businesses that they're hiring people and they're going to work, and, they're paying their bills. They may live an upper middle class life if they haven't run a good business, but these people aren't independently wealthy, because all of the money is locked into their business, and they haven't sold any shares or anything like that. So a lot of times we see people and say, oh man, I know he got to be wealthy. And it's like, unless he sold something, he's just, got, maybe his salary may be higher, but, that means he's still got to show up and do something to get it. So real wealth, though, is when you've done that. You've already sold something, and now the money that comes in is passive. You don't have to go out and do something for it. It's just going to continue to come because you've done it already. And so you're independently wealthy because you did something, you sold it, and now it's going to pay you for the rest of your life. You don't have to think about money anymore because your expenses are lower than the money that's coming in, and you can think about other things, but money doesn't have to be one of those things that you're thinking about if you do something like that. And that's a conversation that you would be amazed. People, like very prominent folks, who have never experienced that and are looking for a way to experience it. So for those of you who have done that, who have been through that, you will get the attention of lots of folks. Let me just say it that way. And so as long as we're breathing, there's still a new life that can be created. There's still new goals for us to access and get into. And so I wanted to kind of share, and quickly with this, I'll share my most recent, attempt, if you will, to go deep and dive deep into my goals, particularly for this year and beyond. And then we'll open up the call and just, see if anybody has any questions or comments. I want to dive into what they've been working on. But going back to the work equation, goals plus risk times faith equals the work. And why the goals piece of this is so important. Being in a position where you can begin to start leveraging or trying to increase the things that you already do well. So you say, I know I'm good at this, but I really want to get to here. And this past week, so I would say this I went into last year, the end of last year, going into this year, committed to building out. I didn't just want to be a good advisor and producer in financial services, but I really want to build a great business. That's the core motivating factor for me, in this space is to build a great business, something that not only, people can say, I enjoy being a part of this organization, I'm learning, I'm growing, um, but also would be attractive, to an investor in the future. And so I went to Atlanta this week, and at a conference, practice management conference, probably about 200 other uh, advisors and financial advisory firms. Um, and I'll tell you just real quick, let's just say if there's 200, 250 people there, probably maybe 5 Black people, maybe including myself, 2 other Black men and 2 other ladies, Black ladies who were there. I would say 70% of the room were advisors who have, somewhere between 10 and 50 employees, companies on a managing, maybe like $1 billion or more in assets under management, really producing on the annual revenue, say 20 to 50 million annual revenue. Like, these were guys and owners who were doing all the things that I know is. So going back to goals, right? For me, there are goals that I think are just too big. And it's just, yes, it's a nice idea to have that goal, but it's not realistic. It's not a realistic, not say it's impossible, but it's not a realistic goal right now. So having that thought process of what is a big, realistic goal. And so I said I wanted to spend time with the people who were running firms that were really big compared to what I'm doing, but it's possible. And say if it's possible in the next 5 years. And then on top of that, we always talk about begin with the end in mind. And for me, I said, well, why would you even want to build? Like, when you're talking about goals, why do you want to build a business that can be sold at some point? And if you sell it for how much? What's your number? What is that number that will say, you know what? This is the number that will get me to financial freedom. Some people, it's $200,000 a month for the rest of your life. Not a month, I'm sorry. $200,000 a year for the rest of your life. For some people, it is $200,000 a month. But most people that I work with and I have access to, listen, nah, I can get, if you give me 200 for the rest of my life, I'm good. And if I need extra money, then I'll go out and consult myself and make that extra money. But I need passive 200. And most of the folks who I work with, they're in that 200, 250 range per year. That's what they're shooting for passive income. So if you're going to do that, then you need to sell a business, for more than $5 million to be able to say, I'm going to, or sell something or hit the lottery or whatever the case. But you need a windfall. You need a liquidity event of that 5 million or more. So you can say, I'm going to take 5% of that and live on for the rest of my life, or annuitize it at a certain point. And so I was in this room with these guys, and I'm a sponge. I'm listening. I'm just taking it all in. I'm listening to see, okay, what are you doing? And I'm listening, but I'm listening with the objective of learning. And if I feel like I'm not getting, folks aren't sharing enough, then I'm going to ask a question to get answers. Like, I'm in the room. I'm not going to be around these guys. I got 24 hours with these guys. So let's get in. Like, what do I need to know that's going to be helpful for me to take it to the next level? And starting to ask questions. And then also at the same time, throw in there my own experiences in certain markets and certain things to dive into a topic that I thought might have been complex. And for them, what was interesting, my thoughts were, hey, if it was complex for me, it was going to be complex for you too. There were cases where some of these guys had never even experienced some of those unique topics and client situations. They're like, man, well, let me get your number, man. Let's talk. And so little things like that just added a bit of positive impact to my psyche to say, man, you're in the right room. Because a lot of times you're always asking, am I in the right room? Like, do I need to get out of here? Like, do I belong here? It's like, no, you're in the right room. You made the investment to be here. You put yourself in a position to learn. You're in the right room because you're not only are you here learning, but you're also adding value to somebody else's goals because you may have shared something that even though they may be in a different, say, financial or business position than you are, they came here looking to learn too. So that goes back to that earlier point. That sometimes people would just want to have access to the network that you have, just so they can begin to share and grip and grind on topics that their current network doesn't provide. And that's, especially again, we're trying to go from where we are to where we're trying to go. And so, I want to just highlight that as it relates to the work equation, that before we can get anywhere, we have to get serious about our goals. Like we need to really set goals that will push you, that will allow all of your talents and your attributes to shine. That, and regardless, even if you're in a situation where you said, I'm not physically able to do some of these things, but you are still mentally and spiritually ready to roll. Find goals for where you are at this stage of your life. The areas that you do have that are still strong, that are still active, that are still wanting more. Set goals for that. And don't say, well, if I was, 20 years ago, I would have done that. But now I got this and now I got that. It's like, well, okay, your reality is your reality. Where you are today is where you are today. But where you are today still has life. And if your mindset, I can tell you right now, if you are on this call right now, early in the morning on a Saturday, there's something in you saying, I want more. If you are listening to this and you just so happen to catch it, on social media somewhere, and you've listened longer than 1 minute, if you listen to this longer than 1 minute, there's something in you saying, I think I want in. I think I do need to work on this. I do have something that I need to. I have a goal. I still have it. You know what I'm saying? Like that is just, we're human. We're still in this thing. And let's go and let's just hit another point. We're in a space and living in a time, we need more goal-oriented people, especially if you have solutions that could solve some of these crazy issues and challenges that we're dealing with in this world, right? And so we can't allow good ideas and passionate people to be on the sidelines. And I know a lot of good people who are very smart, very passionate, very intellectual, who have great experience, but they're on the sidelines. They're on the sidelines. They're watching and not in the game. And for whatever reason, it could be 1,001 reasons. Oh man, I had an injury and my knee never really came back together or whatever, went through a death in the family and that kind of rocked me. So I can't really get in the game right now. Just give me a second or whatever. Or, hey man, I did this last time. I got burnt. They rocked me and I lost a lot of money and I'm not getting back in that anymore. Whatever your thing is, it's something, right? And my point is that we need you. That's the end of this. We need you, exclamation point. Let's say it that way. We need you, exclamation point, right? Because we need you. I don't know any other way to say it. We can't you can't sit on the sidelines. That's just it. You got to find a way to get back in this game because we need your voice. We need your experience. We need your guidance. We need your expertise. We need a new way of seeing what's possible. And even if it's just you sharing your story, how you got to where you are, And even if you think your story ain't big, or hey man, I'm not some big multi-millionaire, or I'm not this big person, we need your stories. I don't know any other way to say it. We need it because there is a lack of leadership. And when I say leadership, I don't mean people with titles. I mean people who have the spirit, are willing, have the experience, and just willing to share. Because the other part about sharing and telling your story is you never know who's listening. You never know who's listening to you share your story. And somebody heard what your experience, heard you tell your story and said, that was it. That was it. That was the light bulb. So if your leadership is just you telling your story as openly and as communicative as you can with, and doing on the right, and things are so inexpensive to do these types of things now, right? You don't have to go hire some big production team to do these things. You can just, open your phone and start telling your story and share it and put it out in social media, or organize, have a group meeting, or do online webinars, or whatever the case. Because somebody, just never know, man. Somebody, it may be everything they needed. And so I want to stop there, as because I'll tell you, this so much has happened this month. And I could go on for another hour easy, just talking through the application of the work equation of setting big goals and then expecting the risk. So because the risks are those things that are in your mind to say, this is going to be hard because this, that, and the other. And if you can get to the point where just the perceived or just the expected impact of the risk doesn't take you out of the game, then you're going to be all good. Because a lot of times those risks seem so scary and ugly in our head that once we get into it, it's not as bad as we perceived it. Somebody else may have told you, hey, you should beware of that. And they say, oh, beware. I'm not even going that way, and so it's just a risk you don't even want to touch. I mean, yeah, that's a whole other topic, which we can dive into. But I want to take a second and open up the call to anybody who'd like to share, just as relates to your January, your new year, what you put to work and why, what's happening. Did you even understand the work equation? Is it applicable to you? But what is your methodology? And we're 1 month into a whole new year, so it's done. Like we've done. We've already 2026 is about to move, right? So, how was your first month in this new year and pushing new goals? Or do you say, hey man, I'm gonna start in February, right? I'm starting now. So let's take a second and open up the call now. Anybody like to share about their new year? So we'll open up the call now.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and just share 3 books. I've been reading 3 books this new year in preparation still. I started one of them at the end of this year. And one is revisiting the 4 agreements. And the other one I just had to I started that again this past week. And I was like, yes, Lord. I mean, yeah. It was the reminder. And it was such an amazing reminder. And I read it pretty much every year at some point. But just being more intentional about when I read it, especially when I feel a certain way, kind of revisiting it almost, I don't know, I just need to put that into the flow on a regular basis. And another book that I've been reading is more so just taking care of me kind of thing, and it's called How to Be the Love You Seek. And Nicole LaFera just talks about, she's dealing with childhood traumas and recognizing your own personal patterns. and how that shows up in everything else. And so, like, really getting into where you may sabotage in personal and professional relationships, it all comes back to your inner child. And so really recognizing what that looks like and calling it and working through that stuff, because everything you do it everywhere. And so if you're noticing what's happening personally, it's probably happening somewhere professionally and vice versa. And so it really does just like really walks you through what that means and really getting to your core and then being really intentional about disrupting the cycles. And that's been awesome. And what's my third book? I'm like, I had something else over here that I was thinking through.
What was that second book you said?
Emergent Strategy.
What was that second book? Did you say
the woman, the doctor's name, it's called How to Be the Love You Seek. Oh, okay. She has a first book. Her first book is How to Do the Work. But she's a psychologist, and she really, again, she's dealing with self. And she went into the field to figure out her own foolishness, basically.
Yeah.
But this second book for me has been really powerful in just calling it out. Like, she calls herself out. The way she writes it, she's calling herself out throughout, like really exploring her own relationships and what she was really looking for. And then just like with the 4 Agreements, it's like you can't expect outside to do anything. But people are people. People gonna do what they're gonna do. People are living life based on their own wants, needs, and desires. And this book, like that one, basically your answers are within, and how you respond predicates everything else. And so this just gives it a lot more depth and specificity as it pertains to just relationships and people interacting. Both again, she's dealing with the personal stuff, but what you do in one stage, you're going to do somewhere else. And so just really naming it, she walks you through the thing. She has 3 books. So her first one's a good place to start. At one point, I was sharing with my naturopath that he wanted me to read it. And I shared that with 2 of my girlfriends. Like, oh my God, my therapist told me to read this. So all 3 of us were reading the first book together. And we didn't know that, I didn't ask about if anyone had picked the second book up. And one of the other girls did. So we both were like, oh, you read the second one too. So this has been really just like, my season right now is taking care of me. Like, I just, because I'm gonna start kirking out, hitting people at this point. That's not what I think in my life. And so my quiet time is now, but it's really me and redefining and just getting quiet and really focus on what my needs and wants are, not sort of use anybody else's needs and wants. But carrying out what works for me. Like, I'm into sport cold as hell right now. I'm pissed. This is not what I want. So how do I get out of it? Is my reality. You know what I mean? And I'm the only one responsible for making that true. So it just really takes you through that so that you can, like you said, think about the end in mind and do all those things. But for me, it's been really recognizing how everything, who you are and what your habits are going to show up in every aspect of your life. And so I find myself stuck in some places, but it all translates or comes back to one thing in particular. And so getting down to that one thing in particular can help clear up the trash in the places in which it's been impacting.
That's real. That's really real.
Yeah, I'm in my space right now, yeah.
What was the third book?
Yeah, so that's it.
What was the third book?
One, Emergent Strategy. Let me grab it right quick. Emergent Strategy. This is another how to deal with people in groups. Because again, I'm not that one to fight everybody's face right now because everybody gets on my nerves. But Emergent Strategy just really centers and really gets people to think about what are the norms going to be? And so some of the principles, I'll read a few principles. I think I've answered this before you. It says small is good and small is all. It's a large reflection of the small. And change is constant, be like water. There's always enough time to do the right work. There's a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have. Find it. So this is it helps for me, for my facilitation stuff, like getting people to trust one another, to work together. Trust people. If you trust people, they become trustworthy. Move at the speed of trust. Focus on critical connections more than critical mass. Building resilience by building relationships. Less prep, more present. And what you pay attention to grows. So these are just like the fundamental principles of like this work as you're working with people and you're building community, because that's the work that I find myself in right now. And I've always been that. So when I get frustrated, it's because people aren't moving or seeing what I'm seeing. And so I have to not be angry or take it personal, back to the 4 agreements, but recognize what's missing, what are they not missing, and what am I not explaining well, and what do they not see? And so even though I might want to move fast, it's not the time for that. And so the goal being we move together so that we can have strength in community. So for me, moving fast doesn't meet the goal. So I have to slow myself down and not be upset while taking it personal. I have to recognize the change can only happen sustainably at the speed at which the people who need to change are willing to go. So it's just like, it helps, all these things are like really like mapping out and helping me deal with what's around me so that I'm not frustrated and crazy and delayed. The book I'm listening to is Let Them by Mel Robbins. I think it was one more.
Oh, yeah, Mel. Okay. Yeah.
And not again, saints, all of it, all married together. You can't control what other people are doing, only how you respond to them. And so again, letting them, yeah, let you. But now the other part is let me. So me really conscious about what my response and my reaction and what my plans are going to be. As other people are doing what they're doing, how do I respond? How do I plan in the midst of people doing what they need to do for themselves?
Yeah.
And not taking it personal, not all the things, you know what I mean? So like all of that really does marry really well together because it's best practice. This is where our brain is right now, and this is what I'm feeding myself to build the fortitude to make some really critical decisions in my personal life as well as my professional life. It's happening a little, of course, simultaneously, but the habits of one are impacting the habits of the other because it's the same. I'm the same person.
Yeah, I was sitting here.
Those are the 4 books I'm sharing.
No, I love that. First, I love that. That is, we need, first of all, anybody's reading good books, please let us know so we can plug that in. One that you just hit me though with the, from the emerging strategies when it said that there's always, the time is always right to do the right work or something. It's always time to do the right work or whatever. That part is so real. And then the question, and what I see a lot, particularly just in business and working with, businesses who are trying to grow, the question is identifying what is the right work. And so it depends on who you're talking to, right? Because like we said, begin with the end in mind. What work will help you end the way you want to end? So there are a lot of times we could get caught doing just busy work, but is it work that's moving the needle of the organization? And so actually having...
If everyone at the table doesn't have the same vision.
See, that's the point, right?
That's the problem. That's where problems come. That's where problems happen. Everyone doesn't want the same thing. And so we're working towards different goals and we're wondering why we're frustrated. We're not clear about where we're even
going. I'm trying to, because these calls are videotaped and people watching, there's only so much I can say. But I've definitely had some situations recently, that it was clear that everyone, or at least there were some folks who had a different view of what the work is and what we're doing and where we're going than other people. And the truth to that is the leaders of the organization or the owner of the business or the general manager, and these are the people who are setting the tone as to what we're doing, what's the work. Now you could, if you're not one of those people and you feel like the work is going in the wrong direction, right? And say, you know what, I think we're going in the wrong direction. This is a classic example of why people leave the E quadrant and go to the S quadrant. Because they're like, I'm working for this organization. They had the resources, they had the this and the that, but they were focused on the wrong outcomes. They were focused on, they were doing work that really wasn't moving the needle. I got to get out of there and start my own thing. And so I can begin. And I've had conversations with on the side of working with clients and their staff, and even in nonprofits, and working with on the boards and working with their folks, people who just had two different directions as to where they thought we should go as an organization, and some being hell bent on making sure that I know this isn't my company, but I'm going to steer it as if it's yours. And I'm here to tell you, that's not a battle you want to fight. You want to, if you're really focused on that, it's time to move to the S quadrant, or either go run a B, go run a B quadrant organization, go improve everything that you're fighting over here. Go and show that you can do it, by either building it yourself, or go buy somebody else's business, or go convince somebody else that you should run theirs. But it ain't gonna happen here, right? And that happens a lot. And but we see a lot of organization leaders who aren't confident enough in what they're doing to make sure that the staff understands that this is the goal and the objective. And if you don't like it, you should really invest in yourself and go somewhere else, because this is the work that we're doing. It's a lot of organizations who would just sit there and just say, well, let's kumbaya this thing out, right? And while you're trying to kumbaya, you're running your organization to the ground. Like, there's no money being made. There's no people aren't being affected. The cause and the objective and the purpose of the organization isn't being reached. It's just a bunch of paper pushing. So we do have to have those. Are we moving the needle type conversations with it, especially when you're working with other people? And that's the most difficult part about moving from the S to the I. I'm sorry, from the S quadrant to the B quadrant, is, if you're a specialist and you know how to do a thing a certain way, and you double down on that, but you don't really mesh well with other people, you're not really kind of a good teacher, if you will, or a good educator and trainer and developer of other people, then those are areas where you have to hire folks to do it. You got to know where you're strong and where you're not strong. And it is extremely important to make sure that if you have access to information that could advance your organization, but you don't have the skill set to actually be the person to communicate it, therein lies a staffing opportunity. That's where you need to hire somebody to do it, because it is really a challenge. And I like the other point. And Ty, what was the name of the the author of the book, How to Be the Love You Seek?
Yes, it's Dr. Nicole LaPera.
Got it. Nicole LaPera. Okay.
And the first book is How to Do the Work. So there's like a series. So How to Do the Work is the very first book. And she really talks, it's the healing of relationships. So, that's what all of it's about, but that's the very first part.
Okay.
And then she walks you through like other, going deeper and being more specific around it. So, yeah, I really enjoy her. And my naturopath, I told him that the three of us were reading it. He was like, oh my God, he was so excited. He was ridiculous. But he was like, this is going to be great. When I'm going through my divorce, and this is the only thing keeping me out of the daggone prison. I'm like, okay, sir, sit down. You know what I mean? He talks about living, being with a narcissist, and what that did to him, and what he had to realize there was only so much he could do for himself. He couldn't fix her. And so essentially saving himself, but it took so much out of him. And so it just really helps you like quiet the noise around what's really happening, and then being able to say what is me and then what is not me, and then helping you make a decision to move to spaces or to work through, if possible, how to do it, because you have to know your own junk. You know what I mean? Like, that's really the bottom line with all the work, with self-work. You got to know who you are. And if you're not in touch with that, everything is, everything could possibly, anything can be kindling. You know what I mean? If you get with somebody with the same crap in work or in business, and in work or at home, it's just frustrating, and you can't get out of it. But if you don't recognize it, you won't understand why it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so with all of these books, it helps with clarifying who you are, how you show up, and how you recognize what your own crap is, so that when you see it in others, or when you recognize, you see that, okay, this isn't my fight, this isn't my battle. And I think for me, that's been my biggest thing. I've taken on other people's battles under the foolishness. You talk about people not knowing when to hire out. But also, if you're the person like myself as a consultant, you need to know what your worth is and say, well, this is what it's going to cost you. I'm not bending over backwards to help your broken organization if you don't think it's valuable. If it's not valuable, don't waste my damn time. And I'll walk away.
Yeah.
No, thank you. This is how much it costs. This is what we're going to do. If you don't want to do this, and you don't want to pay me to do this, I'm not going to be here for you.
Yeah.
Be in and be okay with it. And
be okay with
for me, because I don't want anyone to fail. And working with kids, I don't want these kids to go out. So I'm out here hustling and bustling, and I'm not being valued, but I'm doing the work. And I'm not being paid right, and I'm working really hard. And why? For what? No, absolutely not. Like, that's where I am now. Oh, nope, absolutely not. So, but I had to get tight around it, and no, this is what it is. You don't argue with your accountant about how much it costs.
Oh, they try to. They definitely try.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. That's really good to know. Thank you. Because I'm like, when you go to the spa, it is what it is, right? But they'll argue with, they're thinking, I'm like, this is how much it costs. And I value my time, and I value the work that I've done to be able to say that I can do this work. You know what I mean? If I didn't think I can do it, I wouldn't write this proposal.
That's right.
But I can do it. And I was just like, I was this past week, and I was kind of like off the cuff, kind of like showing my friend what I had proposed for one of the organizations I was working with. And I just started talking to the business owner, and she was like, oh my God, I would love to do that. And she just goes through this whole thing, bring me a letter. And I'm like, I'm not working this project no damn more. So now I got to, since I open my damn mouth trying to be a smart again, now I got to go write a letter and still get these people a hookup because I opened my mouth. So I know what I'm saying works. You know what I mean? But if you don't believe it, then that's on you. It's not on me. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, let me say this to you, and I'm so glad you said that. First of all, Ty, I want to highlight. I'm glad you shared that point, because that ties back to, there are things that you just have to, when you have value that you're going to bring to the marketplace, then the next question is, how much time am I going to spend on this? Right? So the things that you know that these folks need the information, but they may not have the purse to pay for my time realistically, then you have to create an option for them to access parts of your time, and they can run with a little bit, or maybe that's a group setting where you do these seminars and everybody pays to get into it, and you drop some information, and then you run back to your big clients, right? So because when you have value and people want access to it, but what they really want is your time, right? So I'll tell you, I just had this conversation. Man. So with the good friend, and I mean, it's just been, when you talk about people who are just extremely talented, and watching people abuse their skill set, and all while that person's trying to create what does progress look like for them. And I will tell you, part of the reason why I sent out the call today with the hashtag of progress and peace, because there are just so many examples that I've seen just in the past month of people who have set goals, very detailed goals, already into the work of accomplishing those goals. But it was clear to me, just from the outside looking in, that there's no peace involved in this goal setting process. That you could very well have accomplished the goal hoping that peace was on the other side. But for some folks, what's required to even attain it, in a combination of personal and business and let alone society issues, some people don't make it to the other side. Some people, that stuff will check you out if you don't have peace in the process. And at some point, we're going to do a call just on peace, man. Just and bring in some practitioners just to, to dive, because let me tell you, if I can't get through this process of setting new goals that I truly believe are divinely inspired goals, but I got just hell running through my mind and spirit the whole time, and I'm taking meds just to, keep my blood pressure down and all this kind of stuff. Like, stress pushes people to early graves so much. I mean, historically, and especially in our community. And we don't have to assume that working hard also means increased stress. That progress also includes, nonstop stress. This is why we have to be very clear and excited about what our real end goal is. Because if the end goal is something that includes peace of mind, it could create wealth. It could have an end goal of saving a population or whatever the case. But because again, some of our goals are so massive, so intertwined with other things that we may not live to see it, right? So you have to find ways to infuse the process to stay at peace with your spirit and mind all throughout, while you're working to push, while you're working to develop, while you're creating that whole ongoing nonstop lifestyle that we've created. So I wanted to just leave that piece in there too. And so having recommended books and webinars and YouTubes and people who specialize in these topics, this is great, Ty, again, to share those types of books and authors and all that, because we all listen. I had a meeting yesterday, with a client who doing great work, just really pushing, but it was clear that her so many different things were going on that was just now it was becoming layers that was clouding her vision and not allowing her to really see the goals and objectives with a clear eye. And so bad decisions were being made because other things were just going on and getting in the way and affecting the work and affecting her ability to see through all the challenges to still be working toward what that end goal is and accomplishing that. And that part is so important for us to, again, why it's important to have peace woven into the process. I was meeting earlier this week, and brother was like, hey man, just make sure for 45 minutes a day, you just go for a long walk. It's like, make sure you're going for a long walk, 45 minutes a day. Nobody's with you. Don't bring your wife, don't bring your daughter, don't bring this. You go out there and just go walk. and allow your thoughts to expand and actually just kind of go into the skies, and be in a position to allow clarity, to allow peace, to allow nature, to allow all of that to just re-infuse into your spirit. Because if you're not doing that or doing something that is allowing you to just throw off all of those things that are clouding your mind and your spirit, then it will show up. And you talked about this, Ty, earlier, when personal mixes in with the business, or when business mixes in with personal, and you're doing the way you're handling your personal, you're now handling it and it's showing up, so how do we interrupt it with peace? I mean, my sister, Candace used to always say, it's time for a peace break. When is your peace break? What is your peace break? How does that peace break come in? I think Paz actually has where his phone would just, or he get a notification throughout the day at different times of the day for gratitude, just to remind you to be grateful for what's happening right now, and however you use that time interruption to infuse peace, to infuse gratitude, all that into your day. Listen, that's a real thing, so because again, as I was highlighting earlier, we need you. We need our leaders. We need folks to put themselves back into the conversation. We need the voices, and we won't hear those voices if stress, worry, doubt, sickness, all those things become more prominent. And then so next thing you know, people are like, man, whatever happened to Dees? And he used to have those calls, and so next thing you know, Dees ain't live no more. It's like stress, worry, doubt, health, all of that came in and took over. And so we have to, as we're focused on our goals, infuse peace and dive into some of these good books that Ty just mentioned. I forgot. I remember I read the 4 Agreements a long time ago, and I need to jump back on that. Especially traveling, and if you're on a plane or if you're in a car, just knock it out on Audible just so you can get it back in your spirit. But I appreciate that. That was good. Anybody else? Let's open up the call. We're at 8:30. Wow, this thing is flying through. 8:30. But let's open up the call. And anybody else would like to share? Let's highlight what's going on in January. What's gotten you to where you are right now? The good, the bad, the ugly. We'll open up the call now.
I'm glad to add an opportunity exactly your call for necessary leadership. There's a leadership vacuum in this country, from top to bottom at all facets of our country, from government to company institutions to nonprofits and even our religious organizations, and even in our family situations. Mm-hmm. A lot of our leaders have been, their spirit has not been nurtured. A lot of times we look at large corporations or places of work. What do? They collect a lot of high potential individuals and then underutilize them just so they can have them on hand. So we need to release those people because our communities are suffering or at least are in need from the spiritual, the mental, and the economic vitamins that a community needs. Mm-hmm. We look at some of the developments and policies that are passed and budgets that are passed that do not benefit the everyday person more than, say, those that have more than. Well, a part of that reason is because they don't have the warriors and the leaders and that have the strength, the strategy that you all have. To go against and advocate them on their behalf. We all took the deal. Most of us took the deal. But as far as risk, y'all already I've already been thinking, and that is you're going to be one of the guaranteed forms of stress or depression is to give somebody a lot of responsibility and give them hardly any authority. And that is what you sign up for when you become someone's employee. At some point, you're going to hit a stagnation point of, I just don't understand why they don't do this. And if you find yourself venting more weeks than you feel like you've accomplished something, that should be a sign. As far as, but there's always a level of risk. Risk is something that has we've become a whole lot more complacent because of the amount of things that have been afforded to us in this at this time. We are able to purchase so many things to give us temporary comfort or relief. But we forget that every time you leave your house, you're taking a risk. Every time you sit around too long, you're taking a risk. Your health. You're taking a risk of not choosing the gifts and talents that are already within you. So there is a such thing as taking calculated risk. And how many of those? How do we not take risk in the workplace because of we're afraid of getting in trouble or it not turning out right? I see so much risk of behavior in the several meetings, whether in the company I work for or when I'm meeting with suppliers, when they know what the right answer is, that they're like elementary students who they know how to do the problem, but they're afraid of being wrong. And we cannot afford to have that anymore. This society and this country, our nation needs you, our communities need you, our families need you. We need to step up. And on top of that, just some practical matter. This, not to make anything, I bring up, I don't like talking about government stuff in the form of saying that something is quote unquote political. That's more of a partisan stuff. But you have to get into governance. I heard a long time ago that if you're not in politics, then you're not in business. And you have to understand the governance of budgets that are passed at your county level, your state level, and your federal level. But for the sake of brevity, I know I've already been speaking too long, is that the big, beautiful bill that is controversial for some and a very welcoming blessing to others, if you actually take a little time to glance at it, almost 80% of it is pretty much laying it out to you plainly. This bill is pushing everyone to, you're either going to suffer in a W-2 role that may not be there for very long, or you're going to benefit from almost everything in that bill. 80% of it is geared toward business operations or proprietorship. Literally the amount of, and in some cases you can take a write-off of 150% of what you actually paid for an asset to run that operational business. So just get involved in governance. You ain't necessarily got to, go to a lot of meetings, but make sure you're aware of what's passing and look at things. This country discovered a long time ago that we're filled with a lot of, shall we say, violent people. And in order to keep them at bay, we made sure that they stay employed. They will spend money to make sure they stand up companies to keep them employed. But one thing that they cannot, the government has very rarely attempted to do is command the entire population or the majority of the population on what they can and cannot do. So that the way that they do is they incentivize through policy. Hey, you may not want to be married, but we're going to give the biggest tax credit to those that have and start a family. Therefore, you're going to pay more for retaining to choose single, for example. And that is how government pretty much nudges us into making a choice. Either you can swim against the current, or you can smartly come up with a strategy for how to go along with it and jump off the bank. And with that, thank y'all for your time. Thank y'all for the inspiration. And let's look forward to the next caller.
And that, my friends, is my college roommate, Brother CJ Battle. I love it, man. Listen, he ain't lying. Which is partly why I want to bring back again this book, The Cash Flow Quadrant, because that bill definitely was outlined for job creators, the employers, and folks who are creating opportunities versus those who want to get a job with that group. And so, and that's, you kind of almost have to expect it. And to your point, you know, politically, we can't afford, and I say we, usually when I say we, I'm talking about Black people. But at this point, the American people can't afford to be partisan anymore. We can't afford to be partisan. We have to be able to move on an agenda that will advance your families, the interests of your families. And you have to figure out what is this one doing good? That's advancing my family. What's this one doing good? That's advancing my family. What's this one doing bad? That's advancing, that's hurting my family. You know, so we have to have an interest, and we can't be in a position where we're depending on someone or some group to be that advocate for us anymore. We're just past that point in our political system. What we understood as liberal and conservative and Democrat and Republican, it before our eyes right now is being abolished. It's being completely just ripped into shreds. And we have to figure out, how do I advocate for the advancement of my family and my people, you know, my community. So now we're very, you know, we're very local at this point. And that is where you can get a lot of things done. And to CJ's point, the more we can lend what we know and understand, our talents, our expertise, to the community you're in and the communities that you care about, and be involved in that, and in the ways that you know how to be. You know, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, you got to go run for office." Like, that's not always the solution, but it may be the solution to organize around an issue that your community is dealing with, that has to interface with those who are in office, and make sure, because the other part to it is, you know, when we start talking about policy, those folks need help too. I mean, it's important to sit down and just have coffee with the legislator to help draft policy, to help flush out real practical ways to advance their constituents. And they may just be running off of a playbook of an agenda that the party gave them to push. But every now and again, you have coffee with the legislator and say, "Hey, listen, let me just be clear with you about what's happening to my family or my business or my clients. Here's what's happening. And I just took a look at that bill you passed. And I just want to let you know, just from a practical perspective, how that bill affected me. And I understand why you pushed it. I understand why that was, you know, and who told you that you should push it. But I want to give you a practical example of somebody who voted for you, that this is why that bill is bad and bad for me, my family, and my interests." And even if it's just a cup of coffee, just, you know, say, "Hey, you know, I voted for you. I think what you're doing is great. Can we sit down for a cup of coffee?" And just like that, you're able to share and build a relationship and make your politics very local and practical. Then we're at a position where you can, and then, hey, have that same conversation with someone who you didn't vote for. And so they also know how it affects you, your interests, your family, your business, your community. Because again, a lot of times they're thinking so high level from a political agenda perspective that practical, people don't think they have access to their legislators. Well, you do. And you just have to create that access. You may not be able to pull it off, you know, with some opposing group who's, you know, protesting outside, but you can meet with a staffer. And then that staffer may say, "You know what, hey, you need to sit down with this guy. You know, I talked to him and I think you need to sit down with him." And that has happened to me several times over the years, in just beginning to, you know, trying to push an interest. and sharing a viewpoint that they just didn't have in their policy write-up. When they're in their work groups and coming up with policy, just nobody told them. And it was like, man, I can't believe they did a bill like that that's messing up our. Nobody told them. So, and if you know something that their team doesn't know, you need to let them know. So it doesn't have to be so big thing. You got to lead some organization and all that, but you do have to make sure that your voice and your perspective is involved and in some way getting out there. So now I completely agree. And back to the earlier point, we just can't afford to be on the sidelines anymore. We're watching something happen in front of our eyes. And for those who are students of history, you can connect the dots. There are approaches and agendas that are trying to bring back a certain type of policy and world order, if you will. There's a lot of folks who have been carrying kind of the mantle of our world over the past 80 years since World War II. And, we're living during a time where they're saying, okay, that time's over. That level of world order is now over. We're going to rewrite that and create something different. And without telling people specifically and honestly what they're trying to create. So if you're just kind of on the sidelines, oh, wow, that happened. And before you know it, everything has changed. So this is just not the time to be on the sidelines. But this conversation that we're having right now is more important than ever. And I'll just be honest with you. I think about a lot how to continue this type of conversation in a way that allows more people on the ground to get involved and be a part of the conversation. Because when I say on the ground, I'm talking about, it's one thing to have the quote unquote, the leaders making decisions for people, but it's important for the people to make decisions for people. Folks who don't have a voice, the folks who don't have a candidate, the folks who, they may not have all the education and all of the, the long fancy schools and all that behind them, but they are the tried and true folks of a community. And that's something that we have to do to make sure that they do have a voice and that it's infused in policy. So definitely happy to grip and grind with you, brother, on those type of topics to figure out ways to be, especially, and then just test it out in our own local communities. Take our neighborhood and just say, all right, let's test it out here and see what happens. I'm game. I'll sign up for that right now. So, and we ain't got to run no ads. We have to run for nobody's office, but we can come up with something that can be of service to a community. And if it works in that one, then let's try another one, and see what happens. So I'm definitely game for that. And I appreciate you, man, joining the call too, man. I'm trying to think if this might be the first time you've been on the call, or at least have verbalized that you've been on the call. So I appreciate you, brother.
No problem. This has been the first time I've actually verbalized. I'll be on the call.
All right. 8:45. Anybody else want to jump in before we finish up for the day? We'll open up the call. Anybody want to share just your thoughts? January, what you're working on?
Yeah. I'll go these. If I don't care.
Hey, how you doing?
First of all, I want to say, hey, I am wonderful. Even better now. But I want to say thank you to your roommate, right? Did I catch that?
Yeah.
The last gentleman. Because everything you said was just exactly what I needed to hear. So I was the wonky one that posted that sent a message that said my job was eliminated a week ago. And it's funny, when it came, I was sitting on a plane heading to Nigeria to go do purpose work. I run a foundation out there, and so I was sitting on the plane heading there. And I knew it was good news, but didn't know exactly how. January usually for me is a month where I sort of take a step back and sort of pray, meditate, listen for direction for the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And the call about my, jumping eliminated came in on, almost the last day or the day before the last day or something like that, that Friday. And I thought it was very apropos, but I couldn't figure out why. But since then, I've been sort of, sitting on this idea of maybe it is actually time for me to leave corporate America and go build business, build my own business, and do more purpose work. And I think the more I sit and I listen and, I hear sort of the comments around the gaps in leadership and the fact that we need to get involved and the importance of business in this particular political climate, all of that sort of seems to align for me because it's funny, I think in 2019 I had finished sort of this journey in acquiring a PhD in organizational leadership, and a lot of my work had been focused on developing good leaders. Like, how do we get away from the titles that we have and just a lot of the rhetoric that we have to leadership that actually is about the people and makes a difference and has impact and, is done with integrity and service and things like that. And I've done some of that work sort of very lightly from a charitable perspective. But I think, the more I ponder, it's like it's all coming together now in terms of it is time. The world needs a different perspective when it comes to leadership, and there are opportunities to actually grow a business in that space. So more than anything, I want to just thank the brother for sort of his perspective there, because I think it sort of aligns with what I was sort of pondering and juggling with. But in addition to that, it's funny because in the month of January, I've been, writing my goals for the year, and some of them were pretty audacious, and especially as it relates to just acquiring more real estate. And I just felt this need to not back down, just because, my corporate job doesn't exist anymore. And so when I saw sort of the career risk combo, it sort of made me chuckle because career risk and faith, right? Because I signed a deal yesterday to purchase my second Aruba property, and in all, if you look at it logically, it makes absolutely no sense, right? Because now I don't have a job, or my typical corporate job. But I felt that I needed to continue in that path from a faith perspective. And it's funny, I actually feel really good about it, even though I don't know where all the pieces will come from. But it's a reminder, excuse me, it's exactly how I felt when I did the first property several years ago. And so, yeah, it all feels very good, and I'm heading in the right direction, and that it's time to actually do work that, matters to the people, has impact to lives and families, and not just sit behind the screen, almost like you guys were talking about pushing paper, and not really realizing sort of the impact of your presence in our world today. So I just appreciate all the thoughts, comments, feedback, direction, all of that seems to align and get me where I need to. So thank you.
Well, listen, first of all, Adiraka, I appreciate your honesty and transparency on everything that's happening right now. We definitely should talk, because there are a lot of things just in what you shared that could just be the catapult for you. I always, especially whenever. So first of all, let me take a step back. And I yesterday I shared with the client that one of my goals, and this has probably been a goal of mine since, I would say maybe definitely before the pandemic. So maybe not fully 10 years ago, but about 10 years, to go around the country, have conversations with leaders in corporations. Well, actually, and let's just say African American leaders who work for corporations throughout the country and the world, if you will, and who are C-suite level folks running divisions, the whole nine, and show them how and why they should start their own business, and if they or they should go into business. So whether they start it themselves or they go and buy somebody else's business and they run that operation, or whatever the case may be. And I'd say 8 to 10 years ago, it was more passion kind of theory kind of thing. And we had a couple of examples where that showed where that happened and it worked. Now we're in a space where it's like, it has to happen because we're being forced out of the market. We're being forced out. Whether literally yesterday, I had a conversation with the client who was partner level at a major corporation. But as soon last year when lawsuits started coming out about corporations having DEI practices and partners becoming, Black people becoming partners when they shouldn't have. It was only because of DEI and all that kind of stuff. And now these folks are no longer with these corporations where they were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So that's one part of the conversation. Probably a much more real and practical to me is, about 70% of my clients are African American owned businesses, and probably about 40% of that are folks who were Black government contractors who were part of an 8A program, federal contract. And now just sit here and 2-3 weeks ago, listen to the head of defense, Hexef, say, we're getting rid of it. We're getting rid of the whole program. And anything else that smells like affirmative action or DEI or economic set aside for Black business owners. Just yesterday, the Department of Justice just put out a whole investigation of the Baltimore Health Department because of what they are identifying as a anti-civil rights policies within the organization, within that agency. That there were white people who were discriminated against because of programs to support or create whether it be a supply diversity or just workplace factors. So we're not in this situation where it's theory anymore. That's the point. Theory is over. We are now in the place of changes have to happen. It's not just social anymore. This is socioeconomic changes that are happening, and we have to know how to navigate. We have to know how to navigate in this space. And so what do we do? And that's why I always talk about how the cash flow quadrant is one of my favorite books. And it is one of my favorite books economically because it helps us to fully understand asset allocation and diversification, how we earn income and the different quadrants and why, and what's the tax factors, and making sure that we're not just being hit. Well, one of our, one quadrant can get hit because of a government policy, but the other quadrants aren't affected. And being able to break down sectors, like how much of, you may say, well, I don't have any government contracts, but the private contracts you do have are all government related. So when they get hit, you're going to get hit too, So, I can tell you just firsthand, I've had 3 of my largest clients over the past quarter they're frozen. Those contracts have been frozen. I haven't been able to get paid by those contracts because of DEI issues. So this is a very practical, real thing, right? So, but what do? You wallow or whatever? No, you just restructure, you re-strategize, you make sure that you have more things happening in multiple quadrants. And you keep your foot on the gas and you infuse peace. You infuse peace into your process on a daily basis, because when things like that happen, and then when you usually say, hey, well, yeah, let's go get some shrimp, and then the next month say, no, we can't get the shrimp this month. That's a practical thing that is not just in the news, and that's why I say we have to be in a situation like CJ mentioned earlier about just in that bill. We have to know who the bill helps and how to be on the winning side of any bill, whether it was a bill by Obama, Trump, Biden, whoever, how to be on the winning side of bills, given who's going to be elected. That's just the deal, right? We can't wait. We can't wait 4 years until hopefully something good is going to happen in 4 years. Or you can't do that. You have to design a socioeconomic model that wins regardless, and that has to be the strategy. And so, in that situation of, if you look at that cash flow quadrant and you think about how you earn income, and it could be the case that your W-2 income was the largest portion of your cash flow, with that job. But you do have money coming from other quadrants, and then you lose the W-2. Well, again, you may have lost that, but now things that happen when you lose a job, you can then, okay, well, it's time to kind of restructure all of my assets. Now you have to take your money from your retirement, and how do you do that without taxes being affected? How to fund something else that can start something new. So there are ways to do all of this within this, tax code structure that they give us in this country, to move from an employee quadrant to a business quadrant and put yourself in a position to be under a new tax structure, to now have access to capital that you wouldn't have had access to in the employee quadrant, and to be able to then market and market your expertise in a way that's not just for an employer to hire you, but is now marketing your expertise to win a contract. And so, and listen, and I get calls and emails from folks who say, hey, any Black people who run this, or have companies in that, and it's hard, and that's the reason why I say that is the reason why I think it's just so important to go to all these corporations and find them. Like, okay, I saw you run that business and you had an XYZ budget. Listen, we need you to buy that company because they have a ownership team that is aging and they're ready to retire, but they don't know how to. Let's schedule time for you to speak with them. And then if you're concerned about where you're going to get the money, we got an investment group behind you who also thinks you're great, and they would invest in you because they've seen what you've done with, Xerox or, Procter & Gamble, or whatever big company you've been running. They saw that, they know you're good, and you can really add value to that business over there. So let's go make that person retire and send them, give them a liquidity event, and now you run it and create something great. So there are options. And I think that it's just this time for us to take a step back, address whatever the immediate things are, like immediate operation expenses, things like that, address that quickly. And then once that's done, then go really address the strategic plan of increasing the value of all of your assets, so increasing your portfolio, and taking a deep dive into impact. What type of impact are you trying to make? who are you really trying to affect change to, and why? And how do we do that from both, not just a nonprofit perspective or just a political perspective, but also from an economic perspective, and create that type of design that could really check all the boxes that I know most of you guys are flirting around in your brains. I want to provide impact and do good. I want to make money and generational wealth, and I want to help affect change in our society. And those are the things flirting around in your brain. You can do it. It's not impossible. You can build a business, you can build an organization and an advocacy organization all at the same time under one umbrella. It is real, it's possible, you can do it. So I want to say that to those of you who are thinking about it and trying to figure it out, and for those of you later who just yikes, well, how? Show me an example. Let's wrap, because this is a real thing that if you're connecting the dots from what happens in local communities to what's happening globally, never let a crisis go to waste. There's always somebody looking to contract with someone who can solve a problem. And I know we have so many problem solvers on the call and listening. So let's just get organized and do the things that you really want to do, and really play the risk management role here to reduce, risk is part of this work equation. So it requires risk management, and what's real risk, what's perceived risk, and let's just go at it and not be afraid of it. So let's connect. And actually, Aderonke, I actually had a conversation. I need to talk to you because I had a conversation the other day about you and about North Carolina and all of that. So let's reconnect on that as well.
You got it. I'll be on your calendar.
It's 9:00, y'all. It is 9:03. So I'm gonna say this real quick. And I actually got to get out of here because that Maddie's national competition is this week, even though she's got the busted knee. But our Seminoles, the Dazzlers, are out there, and Fusion Dance Team is out there in Orlando. So I'm going out there to put my dance dad hat on and enjoy it and enjoy seeing some great performances. So headed into Orlando in a few minutes. But with that being said, let's open up the call. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Don't care if I'm trying to run out of here and want to just share. Didn't get a chance to wrap earlier. We'll take a second and open up the call now. All right, we did it. So listen, this is good. The work equation, man, I really want to, early in our calls, to just kind of revisit the work equation. Something that's stuck in our brain around what we're doing and how are we progressing, what process are we using to progress, and to make sure that our goals are big but realistic, and that we're doing things to go after it. Like what are we doing to pursue our goals? It's one thing to think about it, and I love that, because we have to formulate and create the ideas, but then what are we doing to actually accomplish those goals? Are we putting ourselves in the mix to pursue it? And is it big enough, in the whole nine? And then just work our way through all the big, scary risks that are out there, and commit ourselves to a faithful process that we're going to do in repetition, and just become repetitive in doing what Tysana mentioned is the right stuff, doing the right thing all the time, and just doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And which reduces your fear, because now you've done it so much, you're not fearful anymore. And allowing that faith to become really the value of the journey, really, and just watch all the things that you've committed yourself come to life. And so there's more to come from this work equation, but I want to make sure for this call that we revisit it and then it's being applied to the work that we're doing. With that, have a great February. It's Black History Month. Go educate some folks, man. Make sure people know. Share the stories. Go find out new stories. I mean, I could tell you some things that have happened this past month around Black history that just blow my mind. But I'll say that for another call. We'll see you. Have a good time, and let's connect. Go to the website, schedule time. I think some of you guys may have my calendar link, but you can go to either website, to dreammakersnetwork.org or to engage-wealth.com to schedule a meeting, whether you want to talk about just kind of planning and strategy. Go to the Dreammakers Network. If you want to schedule time to talk more about finance and financial management, portfolio management, go to engage-wealth.com and let's knock it out. All right, guys. Have a good one.